Alrighty, so today we are just going to be continuing with chapter 10, and today we're starting with the topic of sleep deprivation. So I'm pretty sure all of us know what sleep deprivation is. It's basically to be deprived from sleep. So sleep deprivation, if we're going to give it a definition, it just means going without sleep. And there are two kinds of sleep deprivation that a person can experience. A person can experience partial sleep deprivation, which means that they're sleep deprived, but it's not like completely, like it's just in parts. Okay, you still manage to get some sleep there. Total sleep deprivation is when you completely go without sleep for an extended period of time. So these are basically people who do not sleep at all for extended periods of time. And you might be thinking, okay, well, what do you mean people who don't sleep for extended periods of time? That doesn't make sense. But there's actually been cases of people who, for numerous reasons, have gone without sleep for a long period of time. In fact, if you ever think about like certain torture methods and things that they use, one of the torture methods other than solitary confinement and stuff like that in modern day is actually depriving a person of sleep. Okay, so giving them stimulants, giving them, extremely high amounts of caffeine that don't allow them to really fall into sleep, or just basically depriving them of the opportunity to sleep. Okay, now if you, once you watch that video that I've posted the link to, if you just maybe search on YouTube for another video, I'll just write the name of that guy. Where's my color? Okay, so his name is Randy Gardner. I think you spell his surname like this. Yeah, so Randy Gardner was actually this guy who entered this radio competition, and this radio competition was so unethical. It was like, we're going to give a prize for the person who can stay up the longest without going to sleep at all. So Randy Gardner was eventually the winner of that competition, and he actually stayed up for, oh my God, I can't even remember what was the exact number of hours. But it wasn't even hours, no, it was like days. Like he stayed up for almost like a week nonstop, like more than a week. So it was like, that was an example of total sleep deprivation because he actually forced himself to stay up without going to sleep at all. Okay. 264 hours. Yeah, thanks, Safe. So 264 hours was how long he actually stayed up. So that's like, 11 days. Yeah, correct. Thank you. So 11 days is an extremely long period of time. And during this time when he was total sleep deprived, he started hallucinating, he started seeing things that weren't there. He started being a little bit like delusional as well, thinking that people were like out to get him, thinking that his house was like breaking down or something. So like he started to experience a lot of the symptoms or effects that we are going to talk about today. However, for our study design, Vika used to focus a lot on total sleep deprivation, but for our study design, partial sleep deprivation is what we're focusing more on, okay? Although it's probably less interesting, the reason Vika apparently want us to focus more on partial sleep deprivation is because it's something that we see more like, I guess, in the majority of the population, okay? We don't see the majority of the population being total sleep deprived, except those extreme cases. Okay, so basically, partial sleep deprivation is getting less sleep than what you normally require. It's like if you, for example, have a few nights a week where you are only getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Okay, that's partial sleep deprivation. Total sleep deprivation is not sleeping at all, basically forcing yourself to stay awake for the purpose of winning a competition, breaking a Guinness World Record, or simply because that's the torture method that's being used against you. I don't know. Okay, so partial sleep deprivation is more common, so that's the one we're going to focus a lot more on today. All of the effects that we're looking at today are more geared towards partial sleep deprivation. Okay, so we're not going to learn about all the interesting hallucinations and things that people can see when they are totally sleep deprived. We're focusing more on the partial sleep deprivation side of things. Alrighty, so what are the effects of partial sleep deprivation? So we call them the ABC effects. So A for affective effects, behavioural effects, and cognitive effects. Okay, so that's the ABC. Just remember it like that. So we're going to look at what each of these effects are and just look through some examples. And this is when you are partially sleep deprived. So affective effects are basically looking at any kind of change related to your affect. Okay, your affect, and I keep calling it affect because I don't want both of those words to sound the same. So your affective effect affect basically means anything to do with your feelings or your mood, okay? When we say that she usually has a positive affect or affect, it means that she has a positive mood, okay? So affect is related to your mood, and obviously when we talk about your mood, it's also connected to your emotions. So your affective effects are basically any changes to do with your emotional state, with your mood, with your ability to control emotions or manage your emotions. So that's basically our affective effects. So that's after going without sleep for a short period of time. Oops. And that is basically your partial sleep deprivation, okay? Not total, because total means that you are gone without sleep for extended periods of time. Now, some examples. Irritability. Irritability means you get irritated very easily, okay? People just do the tiniest thing and you just get super irritated. Increased aggression. So if someone provokes you, you might punch someone, I don't know, bash someone. Intensified emotional displays. So that basically means, you might, for example, if you see something upsetting, you might actually full on start bawling or crying, as compared to just getting a little sniffly or just feeling a little sad. So your emotional displays are intensified. Or another common example is when someone asks you something, you snap at them, and that's not something you'd usually do. Also reduced empathy. So reduced empathy is you find it difficult to understand how other people are feeling, and so that kind of comes as a result of not having enough sleep, being very cranky, being very irritable as well. Okay, so yeah, this is a funny little comic. I don't know why I put that in there, but yeah. So yeah, basically when we are partially sleep deprived, it can affect our mood and it can affect our emotions, okay? And when it affects our emotions and our mood, that is when we talk about affective effects. Okay, how do I delete all this? Okay. So the next one we're looking at is behavioral effects. So behavioral effects are basically talking about, okay, how is our behavior or our functioning or our actions, how are those things affected when we are partially sleep deprived? So behavioral effects are basically changes in our actions or the way that we function, the way that we basically behave, in other words. Okay, so our actions, our physical behaviors, what we do, how we function, all that stuff, how that changes after we go without sleep for a short period of time. Again, going without sleep for a short period of time is partial sleep deprivation. Okay, so there's some examples of behavioral effects. The first one is sleep inertia. Now, sleep inertia, you might remember from chapter 9, it's basically when you wake up halfway through a nap or halfway through sleep and you feel like this sense of like, where am I? How long have I been sleeping for? What day is it? What century am I in? All that kind of stuff. So sleep inertia is that feeling of disorientation. If I can draw with this, that'd be easier. Okay, so it's that feeling of disorientation that we experience when we wake up without getting like restful sleep, without going into REM sleep essentially. Okay, micro sleep is something you would have all probably experienced at some point in time. Micro sleeps often happen when you are doing something really boring, really mundane, really like it's not stimulating your brain. So like, for example, with me, I often get micro sleeps when I'm going on like a long car, like a road trip or something, and like there's nothing interesting to see outside. You know, I've run out of all the good songs to listen to in the car. So then I'm just like, oh, obviously I'm not the driver in this situation. That would be horrible. But yeah, if you're just a passenger in a car, just looking out the window and there's nothing for you to do, or you're on a bus or on a train and you're feeling sleepy, you're likely to fall into a micro sleep, which is where you kind of like your eyes close and you kind of fall asleep almost, and then you kind of jolt upwards. Okay, so micro sleeps are very mini periods of sleep. Some psychologists and sleep researchers don't even classify micro sleep as being sleep because it's just like a few seconds or maximum like a minute. But micro sleeps usually happen when you are feeling very sleep deprived, okay? And you might often see people on the train or on a bus kind of looking like they're asleep, but they're actually just going through a micro sleep. Are micro sleeps better than full sleep deprivation? You know, micro sleep is actually your body's way of adapting to sleep deprivation. It's your body's way of getting some shut eye there, or some kind of sleep, some kind of relaxation as a result of being awake for a long period of time. So yeah, micro sleep having a micro sleep isn't something we should aim to do. It's not going to replace a proper sleep, but when you are partially sleep deprived, sometimes your body just automatically goes into a micro sleep. Okay, other behavioral effects. So these are the sleep-related behavioral effects. Sleep inertia and microsleep are sleep-related. That doesn't mean you have to learn these. You can just learn the other behavioral effects if you want. So other behavioral effects are decreased participation or being absent from school or work. So let's say you woke up at 8 o'clock one school day. You only had like, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes to get ready and come to school. You just were so tired. You were just so drained. You didn't come to school, so you were absent from school. That's a behavioral effect because it's affecting your behavior of going to school. Let's say if I woke up really late one day and I couldn't come to school to teach, so then that would be affecting me as a behavioral effect because it's affecting my ability to go to work. Children who often have behavioral difficulties or who have ADHD or those kinds of attention deficit disorders, generally, if they don't get enough sleep, you'll notice that they are more hyperactive, more pumped up, more kind of like stimulated as compared to if they had proper sleep. And obviously reduced motor and hand-eye coordination. So if you're like a surgeon or if you're like a sports person and you haven't had enough sleep the day before, there's a higher chance that you might, make a mistake, or you might not be able to, I don't know, throw the ball properly, or you might not be able to catch or whatever, like, hand-eye coordination. So that's basically the behavioral effects. And just know from each of these slides, guys, just know at least 3 effects. So 3 affective, 3 behavioral, and 3 cognitive. Okay, now I need to get rid of all the scribbles. Okay, and the last thing we're looking at for today is called cognitive effects. So cognitive effects are our, remember, whenever we talk about cognitive, I always say that you have to remember that cognitive is connected to how we think, how we process information, how we memorize things, or how we commit things to memory. So think, process information, process info, and how we reason, how we plan, I can't even write now, reason, plan, how we make decisions, all of these things that basically require a good amount of mental processing is related to our cognitive functioning. So cognitive effects is basically the kind of changes that happen when we are partially sleep deprived, and how these changes affect our ability to learn things, to reason, to plan, to make decisions, to commit information to memory. Okay, now we have in chapter 8, right at the end of chapter 8, we did look at a study that actually showed us how cognitive decline, or how people can make more errors or cognitive errors as a result of being sleep deprived. So remember that study where we compared a person whose alcohol, BAC, blood alcohol concentration level is 0.05, which is the legal limit, as being almost the same, as making almost the same number of errors as somebody who had been sleep deprived for 16 hours. Okay, so essentially, and we talked about the whole TAC, the importance of, don't drink and drive, and having a power nap and all that stuff. So we have looked at a previous study that basically exemplified, or that basically showed us a key example of how a cognitive effect can be shown through sleep deprivation. Now, other specific cognitive effects that come out of sleep deprivation are decreased judgment. So if you're sleep deprived and you're crossing a road, you might actually, or you're driving a car, you might actually believe that you can make it, that you can actually cross the road, or that you can actually enter the intersection, when actually the car is coming at a faster speed than what you had originally judged it to be. Poor decision making. So obviously, if you, it's always better to not be sleep deprived if you are having to make an important decision, because generally people who are sleep deprived, they can't reason well, and so they make poorer decisions. This is also another thing why the saying comes up of if you can't make a decision or you're worrying about something, it's better to just sleep on it. So you can, your mind can be more clear and you have a better standpoint to make that decision the next morning. Impaired short-term memory. So you might be, if you're sleep deprived, you might walk into a room and then be like, wait, why did I come here? Why am I doing this? How come I forgot to do that? Where are my keys, etc. Problem-solving difficulties. So obviously this is connected to this idea of academic performance as well. A lot of the time, if you're sleep deprived the night before the SAC, or you've been sleep deprived 3 or 4 days before the exam, you're going to have a lot more issues with problem solving. and maybe doing the more difficult questions in a SAC or exam. And illogical or irrational ways of thinking. So this is like, you know, you don't think logically, you don't think rationally, you make like really rash decisions, like spur of the moment kind of decisions that you might later regret. Again, because you're not thinking straight. Okay, so people who are sleep deprived, even if it's partial sleep deprivation, especially if it's a consistent thing, it can actually lead to cognitive impacts then. Okay, and this is a newspaper article that says sleep deprived interns make serious mistakes. So doctors in training made 1/3 more serious mistakes during typically long shifts. Okay, which means they're more sleep deprived during those shifts. Again, connected to our idea of poor judgment. So if you're a surgeon and you're sleep deprived, that's a big problem. You could like literally, you know, do the surgery wrong or make a mistake that could cost a person's life. So again, cognitive effects are related to how we think, reason, decision make, and commit information to memory, and how those things are affected when we are sleep deprived. Okay, so we're just looking at a memory tip now here. So this is just a memory tip to help you remember some of the effects of partial sleep deprivation. You can use it if you want. If you don't, you can just leave it. So it's like, yeah, FITSHIP. So FIT, so F for fatigue, which is again a behavioural impact. Irritability is an affective one. Your thoughts becoming illogical or irrational is cognitive. Slowed reaction time is behavioural. Headaches are cognitive, because headaches do affect your ability to mentally process. When you have a headache, you can't think, you can't commit information to memory. Impaired short-term memory, which is again cognitive, and problem-solving difficulties, which is again cognitive. So it's really up to you if you want to use this or not. Sometimes it does, yeah, you could say for hips as well. Yeah, it would work that way as well. So essentially, yeah, that is what the memory tip is. So yeah, it's very important, by the way, that you are able to not just identify that particular effect, but you should be able to classify it. So if I give you a question like identify one effect of partial sleep deprivation, and you write down fatigue, but then you don't write what type of effect that is, you just write down fatigue full stop, I'm only going to give you half a mark out of 1, because yes, you have mentioned what the effect is, the specific example, but you haven't told me what type of effect it is. Is it affective? Is it behavioral? Or is it cognitive? Okay, so it's always important that you always classify it. Even if you're in doubt whether you should classify it or not, just classify it anyway. You're not going to lose anything by doing that. Alrighty, I think, yeah, that's about it for today. So we are done. So, yep, just a reminder that just before you go, just go back to that video that I showed you at the beginning of the lesson on the course outline, and just watch that video about sleep deprivation. If you're interested in total sleep deprivation, we don't study it a lot in this chapter, but you can again watch the video about Randy Gardner. There's like about 1 million videos about him on YouTube. And yeah, that's about it. And just make sure you do your learning activities. And tomorrow we will start with the interventions for sleep disorders, and we're going to look at bright light therapy and how light can actually help us to reset our body clock or circadian cycle. But that's about it for today. So I'm going to stop the recording here.